Paul Francis, thank you so much for joining my podcast. This is honestly a big honor because I've watched videos of you for many years and gleaned a lot of information from hearing you talk about cymbals. Yeah, it's a pleasure. You are an innovator and a leader in the world of cymbals. You were with Zildjian for 32 years. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
32 years. And now you are making under the mantra of Cymbal Craftsman, making your own cymbals, handcrafting them. And you are a hugely welcome addition to the world of independent makers. I remember the moment I saw that you had made that transition and announced that you were an independent cymbal smith, and it was a very exciting moment for me. So thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you. It's an honor, and I'm glad to be part of the independent cymbal making world now. Very aware of everybody that had been out there, and I became friendly with people like Matt Bettis and Matt Nolan. I know Heather Stein through a couple meetings. And I was aware of you through your drum company, actually. And when I started to kind of do a deeper dive into more of the independence, it was really, really good. And I have a very, very high respect for the independent cymbal makers and how they're doing it now that I'm doing it similarly, because I was spoiled with the equipment that I had at my disposal,
Right.
at my former employer. But the skills are the skills regardless of the machinery.
Yeah.
So, I could tell people I could make 50, 75, 80 prototypes in a day without even thinking about it. And if I make 6 or 8 cymbals a day now, that's really, really good.
That's a good day. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if I'm working just on 22s.
Right. Right.
you
Yeah.
know.
I can attest to that the skills are the skills because I played your cymbals. I got to play quite a few actually at the Nashville, the Music City drum show a few weeks back. And yeah, very, very much floored by them.
Thank
Beautifully
you.
crafted cymbals, sounded amazing, amazingly well balanced. That was actually a question I had for you was the process, the transition process from being where you were to being an independent maker. Some of the takeaways, some of the pros and cons. Obviously, you said the production, the output obviously is sky high when you've got that kind of machinery.
hmm
But what are some of the pros of being on your own? What are some of the things that you've discovered that you really love about being an independent?
There are no guardrails,
Mm,
with regard to having worked for Zildjian. There were series, and there were specific guardrails for each series if you were going to add a model or redesign or whatever. And now the great thing is that if somebody contacts me and they say I would like XYZ sound, I can just do it without having to worry that it fits in a box.
yeah.
Ironically, I spent my entire career handcrafting cymbals with some high-tech machinery. Now, I don't want everybody to think that Zildjian is all robots and stuff like that. That's so far from the truth. But there was some serious CNC hammering machines that really were great to use to work the metal the right way. And I did hand hammering there, mostly for artists. And now it's nice. I'm literally sitting in my garage at an anvil every day with a hammer in my hand, doing it that way. And then I have it's not a homemade lathe per se as much as I had it built, but it's very, very basic. It's just a shaft with a backer on it and a motor, and a pulley system. And it's just fantastic. When it comes to cymbal making, just from my experience, the cup's going to give you the volume and the curvature and the type of hammering. I mean, even with hand hammering, you can make a clean sound. Hand hammering doesn't always equate to some funky, dirty sound.
Mm,
Um, you know, If you want a brighter sound, you can leave the blank heavier. You can bring the curvature up. If you want a lower sound, you just reverse that process. So the knowledge is there. I just, I have very, basic tools that I'm using now,
Mm,
which is fantastic. I do miss the cutting tools that I used at Zildjian.
yeah.
Those were fantastic. And it's not that I can't get them now, but um, the it was easier for me to buy just inserts that a regular machinist would use to cut, because everything's a means to an end to get to a sound. And I think that's what
Yeah.
we're all doing, is trying to get to a sound. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
That's something I'm interested in too, is you saw quite a few of the greatest drummers that have ever lived come through, and you talked to them. You got to hear what they were looking for, and literally had a hand in crafting the sounds that they took and they put on the records. Something that I like to tie this stuff in with the consumer experience, because customers will see videos of cymbals and
Mm-hmm.
they'll say, okay, well, I need that sound. They'll get that cymbal or even a similar model, and it's different. And part of the process of, cymbals are all incredibly unique and individual. And so you're being an independent, it's even more heightened, that like individual aspect of each cymbal being unique. So talk to me a little bit about what you learned by seeing these professionals come through, and what they were asking for, sounds they were asking for, and things you learned about the process of designing cymbals that you now use, I'm sure, on a day-to-day basis.
Well, the great thing about working with the artists is that you didn't have to really spend a lot of time figuring out what they wanted. They always shared with you, I have this cymbal that I really, really like, but I
Mm,
needed to do this. That's where I would be involved, where I would, have a starting point and develop into something else. But most of the drummers that I worked with, they wanted cymbals that were, not muddly, if that's a word. So a lot of the words that they are descriptors that the independents use, we didn't use at the big companies. None of the big cymbal makers used the word like tension. It would probably be more like stiffness in the metal than tension. But the people like Elvin Jones and Tony Williams and Louis Bellson and Steve Gadd, they want, like in a ride cymbal or something, they want some clarity in the stick sound. And then they'll describe, I want it to be darker, I don't want too much spread, or if it's spread, I don't want it to overtake the stick sound, stuff like that. With hi-hats, you want a clarity in the chick regardless of the weight. One thing that people don't realize, back in the 1960s with Zildjian, even before that, hi-hat cymbals were the same weight. They were pitch matched. So you always had one that was a little bit lower in pitch than the other, but the new beat design didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
They went to the shelf and picked 13s or 14s or 15s, and they put them together so they sounded good together. Now most drummers want slightly heavier bottom cymbal. It just guarantees that when you step on the foot pedal, it goes chick, chick,
Right.
chick.
Right.
Orchestral players are very, very specific with what they want and sound. If they want an older sound and a new cymbal, they'll want, like a growl in the crash sound at all volume levels. Project that I worked on was K Symphonic with Mark Demolakis of the Cleveland Symphony. And he was looking for a quality of sound that was a very, very old K Zildjian sound, 100-year-old sound. And that sound represents, a sound and a feeling that came up from beneath the orchestra. So original K Zildjian supported the orchestra. If you think of the Vienna Philharmonic or the New York Philharmonic, and even Philadelphia Symphony, they draw upon a lot of older Ks from Constantinople and Istanbul that they would play. And then when you think of A Zildjian plays above the orchestra. It's more flowery. It's more prettier. So, that's you take all this information in from the different players, and then you have to go and you have to take this, inanimate object and try to get it to be where they want it to be,
Right.
and you making cymbals for the length of time that you've experienced that.
Hmm.
The great thing about what I'm doing now is that I have 3+ decades to draw upon from a lot of great teachers that I had inside the building, in addition to working with the artists.
Yeah.
There was a head cymbal tester at Zildjian named Leon Chiappini,
Mm.
and he and I are still very, very good friends. He just turned, she's 83.
Oh,
He
wow.
he he basically he and I worked really, really intimately on different R&D projects and sounds and stuff. And then another gentleman named Lenny DeMuzio, and he was the artist relations guy
Cool.
at Zildjian, and he started as a cymbal tester. He started 6 months before Leon did.
Mm.
Um, and then, of course, Armon Zildjian, I got to work with him on a number of projects: K Constantinople, A Zildjian and CIE, paper thin crashes, the Sweet Ride,
Yeah.
and just being kind of at his feet and listening to him talk about stuff. And it wasn't a case of, he would take me out to the factory and pick up a hammer, start swinging a hammer, or show me how to lathe something. We talked.
Mm.
I joked that it was like the Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi
Yeah.
with Danielson,
Yeah.
sand the floor, paint the fence. He would talk about how things were done back in the day, and then say, okay, well, the machine, we don't have that machinery anymore. We have this machinery that you do know how to run, but this is the quality of sound that I'm looking for in these prototypes, and I want you to go out and do it. And we talked a lot. We would sit on his couch in his office, or he would pull out old cymbals to reference.
Mm.
And having come up making cymbals and being a cymbal tester, and then getting into R&D, I already had a good foundation
Yeah.
for those conversations with him. And it was just fantastic. Sometimes I look back and I say, I had no business sitting in his office talking to him about cymbals, because he didn't tell you what to do. It was a conversation,
Mm.
and then there would always be like, well, what do you think?
Mm.
It's like, well,
Yeah.
what do I think? I think I better get out into the factory and start prototyping what you just
Right.
told me to prototype.
Yeah.
You know,
It was like he kind of was putting the ball in your court, and then he probably saw, I'd imagine he saw something in you. You were the obsession, maybe, or
Mhm.
whatever it was, to really pursue those sounds. And so he knew he could kind of put stuff in your court, and then he knew you would take and run with it.
Yeah,
I'd imagine that's part, because I feel the same way. I feel like I don't know how I got to be where I am at doing what I'm doing. I just love cymbals.
yeah,
I
yep.
just love doing this. I love pursuing the sound. And so that to me is what's taking me somewhere, wherever that is. And so
Hmm.
that desire, I feel like, it'll take you far if you have the bug for it.
Right. And it's, there's no moving parts in cymbals.
Hmm.
It's not like a drum. You pick the shell
Right.
and you cut the bearing edges and you put the hardware on, and then you have a membrane that vibrates, and everything has to work as a system. The
Yeah.
cymbal is one piece of metal, and you put the bell in there and you decide how you're going to hammer it and how you're going to shape it and how much material you're going to remove or not remove. And you really hope for the best,
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
you
It's
know,
it's so much more simple, and therefore it's so much more complex in other ways.
right.
So
You know, um, Armin was really, really good with prototypes, where he wouldn't point out the ones that didn't sound good. He would always put the good ones aside and said, I like these ones. This is what we're going after. Make more like this.
mm,
So when we were doing the A Zildjian and CIE vintage crashes, and there's a story behind that, and I'll segue
yeah.
back to that. But I made a lot of bad cymbals, bad sounding cymbals. So he would come in and there might be 20 or 30 or 40 on a table, just 16s, and he'd find like 4 or 5 that were really good, and the rest he didn't talk about. He didn't say, hey, these sound like shit. He would say,
Yeah.
these ones are good. This is what we're going after. Make more like this one.
And would you
And
guys
there,
melt down the other
oh yeah,
ones? Just
yeah.
recycle them, right?
It was beautiful. You just go out and there's just this big chopper, and it got chopped up and it went to the melt room the next day. And I have 3 trash bags, like big trash bags full of lathe scrap. And I have to go find a scrap dealer now that will buy it from me.
Right.
You know. But that was the beauty about working in that factory. You know, everything was fully recycled.
Yeah.
Even the alloys that Zildjian didn't make went back to the supplier, you know, to be made into blanks for Zildjian again.
Yeah.
Usually back for blanks for us because they knew what the material was.
Yeah.
The vendor for the sheet blanks. So yeah, you know, that it was really good. And I want to tell this story. Armon would come into the factory in the warmer months for a week out of every month and spend the entire week. And he would want to work on cymbals. He hated looking at spreadsheets and going to meetings and stuff.
The worst.
And he came down to the factory looking for me one day. And I was where my desk was part of this big room that was next to the cymbal testing room. And he came down, he says, "Hey, I want you to come up to my office with me." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. You know, hope I'm not in trouble. Ha ha ha," you know, joking with him. And we were walking back up through the factory, back up the hallway to the front office where his office was. And he says, "You know, I wanna make cymbals like my dad made for Gene Krupa." You know, and he says, "You know, you and me, kid, we're gonna make cymbals like that, like my dad did with Gene." And I was like, like these are like really super thin cymbals, and they're really hard to make consistently. So we get up to his office, and he had like a goodie pile of cymbals that he really liked, and they were just leaning up against the wall. And he flipped through and he found this 16 that was made in like 1930, 1931, and he picked it up and he just bent it, and he played it, and then he jammed it into my chest. He goes, "Can you hear that, kid? Can you hear how good that cymbal sounds?" So then I took it, and having been a cymbal tester for many years, you know, I play cymbals. So I played it, and then all of a sudden, like my cymbal maker switched on, and I'm like, wait a minute. Out of 100 cymbals back then, how many came out like this one? And Armon got really quiet, and he started kind of kicking his feet together. And Armon had a very gravelly voice. And I try to imitate it, and it's kind of a bad imitation, but I'm going to do it anyway. He said, Jesus Christ, you know, maybe 20 out of 100. And then he got really loud and says, "Never mind about that. We're going to make 100 out of 100 sound really good." So, you know, I took the cymbal. He says, "You take that cymbal, and I want you to try to make that, put a process together." You know, and the way that one was made, we couldn't do it that way anymore because we didn't have that machinery. And one of the key things with that project, and we had already been using it with the K Constantinople's, was a specific cutting tool that they used back then. And it's not high speed steel, and it's not carbide. This is pre-carbide. Carbide didn't exist.
Wow.
And he said, you know, there's the cutting tools that we're using for the K Constantinople, you know, make sure you're using that because it cuts and it burnishes at the same time. You know, and I don't know if you do any burnishing processes with your cymbals to kind of stiffen them up.
Not really.
But it doesn't remove as much metal, or if you just burnish, it doesn't remove any metal. It kind of stiffens the metal up if you need to do it. So he goes, "I know we have a lot more of that stuff in this factory somewhere." And I'm like, I don't know where it is. And then one day I found it in this like crawl space. And he goes, "You thought I was a crazy old man. I told you it was there. Make sure you use that on those paper thin crashes." And, you know, we started to make them, you know, because I had to rely on the rolling mill guys and the guys that cupped and stuff. And then I took over after that and hammered it and shaped it and lathed it. And I was working with Leon Chiappini on it. And he says, "No," he would go, rubber, it's all rubber. They're too soft. You got to make it stiffer, you know. And eventually we got to that point where they came out the right way, and they got released around 1998, 1999. And Armon was such a great guy. At that NAMM show, we had like a slat wall display for the new products. And he kind of stood near the display, not right at the display, because he wanted to hear whoever was coming up to play these cymbals, what they were saying without being in their face. And somebody came up with, it was a dealer, and it was playing the cymbals, and really went up to Armon and said, I really want to thank you for making these. These are beautiful, and this is just what we need as dealers, because music is moving in this direction and drummers are asking for these thinner cymbals again. And he said, hold on. And he turned around, and I was talking to somebody somewhere else on the booth, and he literally grabbed me by my suit jacket, by the back of the neck, and he dragged me over, and he said, don't thank me, thank this kid here. He did all the work on this.
Wow.
So I just want to share that, because that's the type of leader he was.
Yeah.
He's Armon Zildjian, and he could take all the credit and say, yes, thank you very much. I'm glad that you like them. I hope your customers like them. And he didn't take credit for stuff. He's like, I have a team of people, and I want you to meet the kid. And when he said kid, it wasn't derogatory to me. He's like my grandfather.
It's like endearing.
Yeah, I want you to meet the kid that did it. So you thank him. And I really, really enjoyed working with Armand.
Yeah.
Because he loved cymbals, he loved music, he loved drummers. So
was it about the I'd imagine there's probably a highly relational aspect to him as well. If he's about the sound, but he's also about, and I've heard you talk about the history of Zildjian on some other podcasts, which anyone who's listening who hasn't heard, you can just search Paul Francis. There's like 3 or 4 podcasts that'll pop up where you speak in depth about the history. But about that process where I don't know if it was probably Armand's dad that started actually talking to the drummers, saying, what kind of sound do you want? And then getting feedback. And then all of a sudden the manufacturing process has changed to adapt to what the drummer of the time was after.
Yep.
So I would imagine he kind of comes from that same lineage where it's about the music, it's about the sound. Ultimately, everything kind of comes down to that. As the
it's all about the sound. There's a story that I heard on a podcast that Bill Zildjian told, and this is about Avadas when he started to make cymbals with his uncle in Quincy. And I grew up in Quincy, Massachusetts, about 2 miles from that original factory.
That's awesome.
So, in the water. Universe is kind of, weird how it kind of directs certain people in certain paths. When I look back on stuff, I'm like, wow. But so Avadas was a candy maker. And I want to point out one thing. His name's not Avadas. It's Avadas.
Avadas.
And it's like being named John in the US. Everybody's was named Avadas over there. So anyway, so he's making cymbals with his uncle in Quincy. Uncle comes over around 1928. They get going in 1929, and he's making cymbals for the U.S. government, because the U.S. government contracted with him to make cymbals for, the different military bands. So he was making heavy hand cymbals. So think about, 2 newbie bottoms being clanged together, and they were heavy cymbals.
Loud.
And after they made cymbals for the U.S. government, they saw that the dance bands were starting to become popular. This is before the big bands, the dance bands, where people would go out and dance to an orchestra in a hotel ballroom. So he takes some brand new cymbals, he puts them in a suitcase, because there's no cymbal bags. Everything that we take for granted didn't exist, puts them in a suitcase, and he goes to the Statler Hotel in Boston. And he goes and he meets with the drummer that's setting up, his drum set for the gig. And he said, I want to be a drummer like you. And I have some of these cymbals that I borrowed from a drummer friend of mine. Can you tell me if this would work for this music that you're playing? Okay. So the drummer opens the suitcase, and he starts to play these cymbals. And Avadas is kind of taking mental notes on what the guy likes and doesn't like. And then the guy slammed the suitcase shut and said, don't bother with these cymbals. Go get yourself some Zildjians. Thinking you gotta get them from Turkey, right?
Right.
And little did he know, this drummer was talking to the father of modern day cymbal making, but he was smart enough from his candy business. I need to make what the popular drummers of the time needed to make the music that they were making, So after that, he started to seek out, people like Chick Webb and Gene Krupa and Joe Jones. This is before he was called Puppet Joe Jones. He was just Joe Jones. And talk to them about what they needed to play. And if you think about it, time was being played on the snare drum before it really transferred to the cymbals. And cymbals were more accent pieces. They were small. Zildjian didn't make cymbals really bigger than 16 inches in the beginning. That was a lot of metal to put through the rolling mill. You could get larger cymbals from Turkey, but the Quincy factory, the rolling mills were run by leather belts and stuff like that. So it was Gene Krupa that said, you have to make the cymbals thinner so we can accent and phrase on them, because what you're making are heavy marching band cymbals. And Avadas was smart enough to listen. And oddly enough, at the Music City Drum Show in Nashville, Gabriel Lawrence had a little booth, and he works with the Mile Cymbal Company, right? And I can say all of this now because I'm unaffiliated except with myself.
Right.
And he had early American-made Zildjians. And he pulled them out and he showed them to me. And he had two, I don't remember the size. They might have been 14s, they might have been smaller. And he goes, "Oh, these are hi-hats." I go, No, you got two different cymbals that are put together. These are not hi-hat cymbals. Hi-hat cymbals would be the same weight. I said, you have a very, very early marching band cymbal that he would have made for the U.S. government. And I said that's before the thin stuff. And he just like, and I said, what you're asking for these, you gotta ask more money. I mean, this is history here.
Right.
And he squirreled the cymbals away. And then he had a paper thin one that was, really, really thin. It was beautiful. And I said, this is the result of his conversations with Gene Krupa. And these are all first generation, 2-3 stamps that would have been trademarked, because I had all those trademarks in my office at Zildjian, all those original trademarks.
Wow.
So I said, you have something special here. So you just don't want to sell these two cymbals that you put together on a hi-hat stand for $250. I said, this one here that's a band, I would charge $400 for it because of what it is.
Right.
Then this paper thin one, I said, this is history that you have. So anyway, he was thanking me up and down because he thought, oh, I just have an old set of hi-hats. And I'm like, no. You have some very, very first American made cymbals here.
Wow.
So Avadas was smart enough to go to the popular drummers, the pop drummers of the day, and make what they wanted. And he knew that, more drummers that were coming up and doing this style of music would buy them. And another thing that he did too was he started to get cymbals into the music stores rather than you writing to Zildjian in Turkey and ordering something. So he got his cymbals out so you could walk in as a percussionist and find stuff already.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I checked out those cymbals at the Music City show as well. And he was telling me all about what you had told him about them. And he kind of he pulled out those hi-hats, he showed them to me, and he quickly put them back in his bag.
I light up like a Christmas tree when I see those things, and I feel it's I have this responsibility to let people know what they have. Because especially if they don't really understand, because you don't want somebody that might know more come up and go, oh yeah, all right, well, 250, I'll give you 225. And then they get on the internet and go, oh, I basically stole these cymbals from this guy because he didn't know what he had.
Right. Yeah.
That's just not right. So
right.
And I went back and played him the next day again because I wanted to see him again. you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. You're thinking about them all night. Like, I gotta go have
Yeah.
another experience with
And
those things.
I took pictures of them and everything, and I shared them with some other people. And I was there with my wife at that show, and I
Yeah.
was really animated about it. And she's like, "Oh, that's nice."
Yeah. Yeah. Like my wife as well. Just, sometimes I watch her eyes glaze over when I get into my cymbal
Hmm.
zone talking about things. I I'm very interested in talking to you kind of in light of, because every podcast I've heard, every interview I've heard, you strike me as someone who does really care about the history of this instrument.
Hmm.
And you, just like a uh, world-class musician, uh, we always look to the past to inform us as to where this art form is going. And so I'm wondering from your perspective now, being in Zildjian all those years and now as an independent, what you see in the market, where you see things going. What's your take on the industry? Obviously, there's a big boom of independent makers right now, and there's people. I believe there's probably a really fair amount of people under the radar learning the art form now that
Hmm.
haven't come out and said, "I'm now a independent maker." So wanted to get your thoughts on that, just based on the history, but also, is part of this just a little bit of a fad, or is there really a boom happening? What's going on there?
I don't know if it's so much of a fad as much as the industry is shifting. Um, I really think that you're going to see smaller companies um, be become even more prevalent than they are now. We did try to create, what would be essentially a custom shop inside of Zildjian, so you could order. Anybody could order. I mean, we had it. I was making stuff for artists all the time,
Mm.
you know. And there was a group of us that wanted to offer that to the entire world. And when you're a Zildjian, a Sabian, a Paiste, or whatever, and you're of a certain size, um, that makes people nervous on how do you navigate that, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, so it wasn't welcomed with open arms, let's just say. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I was able to do it for dealers. I did a lot of K days with Steve Maxwell in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
Memphis Drum Shop. Um, we did some stuff in Boston with Daddy's Junkie Music and then Guitar Center. And, the Steve Maxwell K days kind of evolved from, oh, this is what we have for prototypes that we're working on in that kind of K vein, to them saying, will you make cymbals at weights that our customers want in K custom, K Constantinople? And I'm like, yes, absolutely, because it made my job much easier than trying to guess what
Mm.
the drummers might like that weekend, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So that's where I see that it's going. People want stuff tailored to themselves. I got an email today from a gentleman that said, I saw a cymbal that you made that so and so owns, and I really, really like it. Can you make me something that's in the vein of Tony Williams?
Mm.
That has the kind of spirit of something that Tony would play. And the great thing is that I understand that,
Yeah.
and I
You've
worked.
had your hands on Tony's cymbals.
Yeah,
So
I,
yeah.
I I I had the Nefertiti ride in my possession at the factory for 7 years.
Wow.
So, um, and really, if you played that cymbal, you'd be like, all right, well, yeah, that's a nice cymbal, but it's not magic. There's no angel singing when you played it.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
you heard the recording and then you played the original cymbal, you're like, yes, that's the cymbal.
Yeah.
You know, but people will also contact and say, "Oh, I like the Bill Stewart sound," or I'm making not a Renaissance ride, excuse me, a pre-aged dry light ride for a guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he had one, and there's a hairline crack in his cymbal, and I can't find it, but I can hear it, and he can hear
Mm.
it. So, I asked Adam Nussbaum to send me the original pre-aged dry light ride. I was a lathe operator the day that was being made.
Wow.
And so
Yeah.
I have the cymbal in my garage that was made that day before the name even was conjured. Um, and the reason that I wanted it is for the cup shape and the curvature, what the weight is, how it was laid, what it sounds like, so I can put it together in a new cymbal for this drummer. But to get back to your question, drummers or just musicians, they want stuff kind of tailor made to them. It's like going to get a nice suit. There's a lot of independent musical instrument makers in Boston. There's violin makers, flute makers. I was reading the Boston Globe not too long ago, and there's a flute maker in Boston who's got 4 years in back orders work to do.
Wow.
And this isn't cheap stuff.
No, no,
You
not at
know,
all.
um, but people will know that they're going to get what they want. A gentleman contacted me a few weeks back and said, I'm looking for like an 18 that I has a nice bell where I can play some nice Latin bell patterns on it, and I can ride on it if I want, but also has a pretty crash cymbal. So I said, okay, well, what I recommend is kind of like a K-Suite style design, but a little bit heavier than what that was in the Zildjian catalog. And I think that's my contribution to the drumming community, is that I have all of this history to draw upon to help guide.
Yeah.
One guy wanted to send me a cymbal to modify. He had a 22-inch high definition ride. He wanted me to cut it down to 19 and make it like a crash. And I said, no. I said, why don't I just make you a brand new cymbal? Because it will be less money than me taking all this time to modify this,
Yeah.
And I won't do things that if it's not what the drummer wants. If you send me a really old K and say, I want you to lathe it, down to a paper thin, I'm going to talk you out of it just because of what it is, unless you're really, really demanding.
Yeah.
But I want to help drummers and guide them to the sound that they're looking for, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
And independent instrument makers are going to just, it's the rise of them. I've watched over 20 years, a guy here, a guy there, Spizzichino. I'm very good friends with Matt Nolan. I know Matt Bettis very, very well, and see them come out and do things. Michael Skiba, I don't know if you
Oh,
knew
yeah.
him.
I didn't know him, but I'm very well familiar with his work.
Yeah, I've never played a
Yeah.
Mike Skiba cymbal, but he was part of the Cymbalholic community, cymbalholic.com, where I was the devil for a little while on that website, because people didn't know who I was. They just had a name that was associated with Zildjian, and Zildjian wasn't very open at the time. So he was on there talking about stuff. And unfortunately, we don't have his talents anymore. So, drummers want this. They want something dialed in specifically for them. They don't want, Procter and Gamble saying this is the soap that you have to use.
Yeah.
Because this is what we make.
Right. Right. And tagging off of that, I had someone else on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and a guy named Mike, or sorry, not Mike. What am I saying? I talked to Mike Mangiello the other day. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Burke Doherty, who owns a company called Burke's. Well, his cymbals are called Burke's Works, but he owns a company called Bronze Pie. And
yes.
Yeah. So he has
him.
Yeah, he's been beating this drum for a while, no pun intended, of the independent makers are not charging enough for their work. And if you go around and you talk to the other independent makers, we basically fall in line with the major manufacturers with our pricing. And I'm interested in, since you've been in both worlds and you're doing it by hand now, do you think that the independent cymbalsmiths cymbals call for a higher price tag given the extra work, or do you think there is extra work, or what's your thoughts on that?
I think it does deserve it. Commands a higher price, but we're in the age of the iPhone where I can Google pricing, and the only reference that drummers have are Sweetwater and,
Mhm.
Memphis Drum Shop and Guitar Center. And they're like, all right, well, the most expensive Sabian or Paiste or Zildjian is this. Why should I pay more when I can, I hopefully can get what I want from them, and I don't like to use the word mass produced product, because if anybody sees any pictures from the Turkish cymbal factories, they're mass producing,
Oh yeah.
we're not mass producing, like today I hammered a 22. I finished up a 22, and then I started hammering a set of hi-hats for a guy, a top and a bottom. So we're literally making one at a time, and
Right.
that's this one based off of what somebody requested. If I make 320, if I hammer 3 22-inch cymbals in a day, that's a good day, you
Yeah.
know. So should it command a higher price? Yes, it should. I mean, the Spizzichinos, if you were going to buy a 22, it was like $2,000.
Right.
And he just that was the price. And then you had to audition for him. And if he thinks you were a basher, he wasn't going to sell you the cymbal. But
Yeah.
I don't think you and I and some others are in that position.
Right.
And I also live in the mindset that I want people to play cymbals, and I don't want them to be cost prohibitive.
That's
Okay.
about kind of the where I'm at with it, the struggle, the tension that's there is because I know how much attention and care and love I put into every piece,
Mm-hmm.
but I also know that if I priced a 22 at $1,500 or
Mm-hmm.
$1,200, you may be the only person that would buy it is someone, a lawyer or a doctor, and it's not really going to get played in the
Right.
way because for me it's about the music.
Mm-hmm.
It's sound is everything. So it is a tough issue to navigate.
Yeah. And the I also want to support the drum shops.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a drum shop in Quincy, DeCenzo's drum shop. My
Mm-hmm.
teacher was Dick DeCenzo, and his son Dave DeCenzo, that's my age. We're both 54. And he's a monster drummer,
Amazing.
world class, world famous drummer. And I would go in for drum lessons, and I would ask to look at things. It was the first music store, drum store I could go into, and they would pull cymbals off the shelf and let me play them. So I want to pay that back to the Memphis drum shops and the Columbus Pros, and
Yeah.
Steve Maxwell, big supporter. um great person. When he saw a post that I made at the end of March, he's like, what do you got? Send me a list.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that drummers are still going into drum stores, you know around the country. You have Maxwell's, two Maxwell's, and you have a Forks. He owns the Forks drum closet in Nashville. Memphis Drum Shop, which is just not only being world class, it's a museum when you walk in there.
Well, a story about that. I actually saw you and Leon do what was essentially a performance
Mm-hmm.
in 2010 at the Cymbal Summit. So I was
Yeah.
actually there. I think that was the first time I saw you in person or was even introduced to you.
Mm-hmm.
But that was an incredible event, like 2 or 3 days, and
Mm-hmm.
all these. I mean, DeJohnette was there, Jeff Hamilton was there. I mean, Jojo Mayer was there. It was just a
Yep.
who's who of really incredible artists and performances and stuff. But that shop really is an incredible shop.
It's fantastic, and these people became my friends over the years. So I want to make sure that they still stay in business. So you want to be able to price the product where you can make a living, but also they can stay in business. So so they can get their percentage.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and having come from where I came from, I understand what those margins are.
Right. Yeah.
I know what is kind of expected. and then they take the time and they put it on their websites and they do cymbal videos and stuff. I am absolutely not equipped to do that.
Yeah.
Will I do it in the future? Maybe, but I'm all about making cymbals that you want to play.
Yeah.
So, the cymbals should be, more money, and they will go up. I mean, the raw materials are going to go up. And I don't know anybody that wants to make less money next year than they did this year. So,
Right.
it's going to go up, but it's not going to be cost prohibitive to drummers, because you want to sell to the not only the hobbyists, but the gigging drummers,
Yeah.
that are playing all the time. And so that's my opinion.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me that I'm not charging enough money for, my experience. And I said, well, this is the market pricing. I use the example, and then we can get off this topic. I use the example, you walk into Target or Walmart or whatever, and there's pricing models for a reason. This is, $9.95 for whatever it is, not $10. That nickel makes a difference to us psychologically. Yes. Well, I'll pay $9.99 or $9.95 for that, but I'm not paying $10.
No way. Yeah.
And there's been studies done, and people, they'll want to buy it, but for some reason, it's $10.53. Nope, that number doesn't work for me, whatever reason. So I'm not going to buy it.
And if you are going to hit that higher point, there has to be a difference in the way you're presenting your product. So there are some makers that really have the marketing, the image all really dialed in, and they present a cohesive sound that they offer. The marketing is there, the website is there. They create more of an aura of mystery, and that is what justifies, $200 to $300 more for a ride than someone else. And so a lot of it too is perception. There is a whole side of it too where we want to feel like we're investing in something that will be at the quality level that is the highest. And if it's at a certain price point, it might trick the consumer into thinking, well, this maybe isn't the nicest I could get. So there's like two sides to it too, where it's
right.
You hear people say, like, I increased my prices by 20% and my business didn't change at all, or it doubled for some reason. So it's kind of figuring out where you want to land in the market. But I think especially now that the economy we're going through some stuff right now. People are a little bit more hesitant to spend their money. And, I'm fighting that, kind of figuring out where I want to land on that whole side of things.
Sure. But if people think it's worth it, they'll spend the money.
Right.
Yeah. I always joke that, drummers are cheap, but, as they're looking on their $1,000 iPhone for a better price, they just, you're paying the $1,000 over time.
Yes.
They'll take the money out of their wallet if they really think that it's worth it and it performs the way that they want. That's my experience at different sales events. And I don't remember if I shared this story with you when we were in Nashville, but when I used to do sales events for Zildjian, and somebody would be kicking the tire on a 22-inch K Constantinople, whatever model, and they're like, oh my God, it's, $640. And I'm like, yep. Oh, I don't know if I can afford that. So I said, okay, listen, let's just do a little math. So let's take that $640 and let's just pretend this cymbal is only going to last you 30 years, which if you take care of it, it's going to last a lot longer than you. Okay. Because I've held 100-year-old plus cymbals in my hands. Okay. So you do the math and you divide the 640 by 30 years. Okay. And it gives you a number. And then you divide that by 365 days.
Yeah.
And it comes out to 5 cents.
Yeah.
And I would say, I don't know what you can get today for 5 cents. It's going to bring you as much happiness as this cymbal that you're really loving because you keep coming back and playing it. It's just, you have to pay for it now.
Yeah.
you know,
Or
and
even if you
ultimate,
think of it with the gigs you're going to play, the money you're
yep,
going to make on your gigs. If you kind of think, well, every time I play a gig, I got to take 2 pennies out of my paycheck, and that's going to cover the
right.
price of the cymbal. You know?
So they would buy it. They would ultimately buy the cymbal. And I'm not a
Yeah.
sales guy. I'm a drummer. I'm a cymbal maker, and
Yeah.
I understand. Um, but when you need it's a tool to do your job, essentially, to do the gig.
Mm.
You know, a carpenter doesn't skimp on the tools he needs to build stuff, you know, because it makes the job easier.
Mm.
Um, you know, like when I was building the lathe that I have, and you know, anvil and hammers and cutting tools, I don't balk at that. I know what they cost. You know, I knew what they cost where I worked before, and it's a means to an end, so you can end up with the cymbals, like the cymbals behind you that I've been staring at for the
Ah,
last
yes.
25 minutes.
Right.
So, you know, in order to get to that high quality sound that you're creating, you need to have these types of tools.
Yeah. They're
So,
expensive for sure.
yep.
Very, very expensive and difficult to sometimes they take quite a bit of upkeep and
Mm-hmm.
management. And I have to reface my hammers every now and then.
Yep.
And that's me sitting with a grinder and an orbital sander and sanding blocks and higher
Mm-hmm.
grits and all that kind of stuff is. But I love cymbals so much, I'm perfectly willing to sacrifice to do that.
Right. You
Yeah.
know, I needed some more cutting tools, and I said, you know, I'm going to buy twice as much
Hmm.
this time, just so I don't have to go, oh my God, you know, how many more cymbals am I going to get out of this before, you know, the little cemented carbide on the end of steel is just gonna,
Yeah.
you know, I'm gonna grind it one time, reface it one time too many, it's just gonna pop off on me, you know.
Right. Right.
Um, so I you know, again, I think there's a rise in independent, smaller musical instrument makers that's going to take over um, the larger ones, you
Yeah.
know, and I might be wrong, you know, maybe some of the larger brands will adapt and you know have you know a custom shop inside their factory to address those customer needs. I know Fender has their custom shop with their guitars where you can get you know a similar guitar to Eric Clapton's Blackie or whatever, you know, you name it, you
Yeah.
know, you can get any color, you can actually pick a craftsman at the factory that you want him to work on the guitar that you're ordering,
Yeah.
you know.
It seems like something that, I mean, you would know way better than me, but it seems like something that shouldn't be too difficult for the larger manufacturers to see the writing on the wall
Mm-hmm.
that things are changing in the industry. There is a group of smaller makers that are garnering a lot of attention. You've had some really big name drummers that have endorsement deals posting pictures and videos of other
Right.
cymbals. You're like,
Yep.
that's not a part of your endorsement deal, I don't think. And it's blown the doors off of this, relatively small little industry and shown that we're having a big impact on the
Mm-hmm.
world of cymbals. Um, is it a difficult ask, or is it just something they're just not doing?
I don't think it's difficult, but I made cymbals every day. I saw it, and
Yeah.
I think it was the managing of the requests coming in. Who's going to do that? You know, who, you know,
Yeah.
and how long and how, you know, and I actually put together a program. This is how to do it, how to manage it. Here's the pricing structure, and it just never got put in
Mm.
place.
Mm.
And you know, when you have a companies that are set up to do you know runs of hundreds of cymbals at a whack, having to make one, you know, that kind of messes up certain people in an organization that don't live in that world. Well,
Yes.
how are
Yeah.
you going to do that? Well, you're going to tell that customer that that thickness blank will be available whenever, you know, in a week and 2 weeks and 3 weeks. And then from that point in time, then your cymbal will be ready around this date. And, you know, when something's being made special for somebody, they'll wait for it. They'll wait. You know, I tell people now, oh, you know, you sent me this cymbal to modify, but I'm in the middle of this, making cymbals for a couple stores. I can't get to it for 2 weeks. Oh, okay. I'm in no rush.
Yeah, no
And
worries.
I'm not used to that.
Mhm.
I don't want to disappoint
Deadlines.
anybody. I want it, I got to get it done, and the cymbals that I'm making for this drummer now in Canada, he was desperate to pay me, and I don't usually take the payment up front. I want to hammer and shape the cymbals and make sure they're coming out the right way before
Yeah.
I have you commit any money. Because if the cymbals don't come out the way that you asked for, then I don't want to be holding on to your money.
Yeah.
I want to charge you when the cymbals are done and I say, this is what you asked for.
Right.
But this guy insisted. He insisted, I'm going to send you the money. So, and the great thing that I do now is that when I'm doing something like this, I take pictures. All right, I started hammering it, and here's the top, and here's the bottom. Now this one's all shaped, and I'm going to let it sit tonight. I'm going to play it again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And make sure that it's kind of on point. Don't worry, I'm not going to forget to hammer the bell. I know you want hammer marks in the bell. And here's the hi-hat bottom, and I'm going to move on to the top. And then again, I'm going to let them kind of sit overnight, and I'll play them again the next day. And I don't need to let them sit. I mean, I've hit so many cymbals that were brand new. I know where they're going, but I agonize. If something's specially made for somebody, I want it to be right, and I don't want them to be disappointed.
Yeah.
So is it difficult to put a custom program in place in a larger company? No, to answer your question. It's the willingness to do it or not do it.
Yeah.
And
it could be, I see from the perspective of just a suit that doesn't understand the particulars, doesn't understand the consumer, how much drummers obsess about their cymbal sounds. If you're just coming in and you're looking at dollars and cents and you're saying you want us to spend that much time on one cymbal when we're trying to crank out 200 of this production model, from their perspective, it just isn't going to work. But it might get to a point where that it'll even make sense to the suit. Oh, okay, there's such a groundswell in the industry of people that are wanting specific sounds from, and they're going to these independent makers, and that's a big chunk of our profits we're not getting because we're losing out to these guys. Maybe they'll implement it then,
or not. The upcharge covers the extra time for someone to really pay attention to it. But also there's a mindset that he's making cymbals in his garage. How many cymbals can he make? I mean, he's not taking any business from us.
Right. Yeah.
You
get 50 guys and their capacity in a year. You add that up, and then it starts to become something. But you're right. Just one person. It's
and you can understand that, but it's no Polaroid. They got into the digital camera game late. My brother worked for Polaroid. He was the head of their digital camera division. Okay. And this has nothing to do with him. This isn't a slight on my brother. But they were, and I asked him, I said, what happened? Why weren't you the leaders in digital photography? Kodak invented it. Yeah. Think about it.
Right.
He said they made so much money on film and processing film that they didn't understand the digital end of it, where you didn't need film. You didn't need to process pictures in a lab, and it took them out because they didn't adapt. And that's what happens. So back to your question, what's going to happen? You're going to see brands go by the wayside because they did not adapt.
Yeah. Does anyone, I mean, maybe a lot of the listeners don't even remember or have ever seen a photo center. That used to be a thing everywhere, was a photo center. You would walk in, you would hand them your little camera, and they would, an hour later, they would have 1 hour photo, and you would go get your photos back. And
Kodak and Polaroid sold those machines that they could just put the film in, and you'd come back and all your pictures would be ready. I mean, my son, who's 17, he buys disposable cameras now because it's like a cool thing. It's like cassettes. retro. But he's pissed because he brings his film in and he doesn't get it back for a month. I go, yeah, because they don't have the machine at the CVS or wherever anymore. They literally have to send it away to a lab that still does it.
And it's one lab that services the whole country, or
right,
of the Southeast or whatever,
And I I chuckle. I go, yeah, I understand kind of the cool factor, but we hated it when we got pictures back and your thumb was in the picture or it was blurry. I can't wait to see this great picture of the Grand Canyon, and it comes back and it's not great,
right.
So, digital cameras, it's a little bit easier. This device here, it eliminated cameras and individual cell phones and laptops, because it does everything. This is the one device, and that's the name of a book if anybody likes to read about how Apple put this together. Apple invented nothing that's in the iPhone. Nothing. They just took all this other technology. This is the one time in the history of man where something converged. It's very rare for technologies to converge into one device. They usually diverge because they don't do everything well. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
But and again, the book is called The One Device. If you like to read and you're curious about things and how they're developed, I highly recommend it because I read the book.
Nice.
Steve Jobs was a visionary. He saw people walking around with CD players and cameras around their neck and a phone, and they're like, well, why do I have all of these when I can put it together? Why am I carrying around a case with 25 CDs in it when I can have 1,000 songs in this device?
Yeah.
And our
world has been society has changed because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Business has changed. I built my whole drum business on this thing, basically, with Instagram, and that all of the businesses that come because of that one device that was created it's so influential that it's changed the way we live our lives to an amazing degree.
It's fantastic, and it's dangerous at the same time. Because you have instant information at your fingertips. Information does not equate to knowledge. That doesn't make you any smarter.
Not at all.
Doesn't mean that you really understand what you're reading. You're just reading. Here's some information in the query that you asked or Googled.
Right.
I remember. I grew up with a black rotary phone in the kitchen. My brother, who's 8 years older than me, he got a Commodore 64, and you had to hook it up to your TV in order to, and then you had to tell it what to do. It didn't do anything. So I grew up with, people buying, computers to kind of mess around with at home. And then when I was a senior in high school, we had the Apple II, Apple IIe. And again, you had the big floppy disks and stuff. And we take a lot of things for granted. So I don't know. We're going a lot of different directions with stuff.
I got a way to pull this back. So
pull it back, please.
So
I'm like a squirrel.
Oh, I'm the same way, man. This is the kind of conversation I tend to always have. Is it trails and then we loop it back. But for me, I think I tell people that I'm 32. I feel like I'm the last generation that had half of a normal childhood before smartphones and before just the level of integration with technology that we have today. I got, when I was bored as a kid, I ran around outside and I occupied myself. I wasn't, there was no screen shoved in my face. There was no wasting away hours on video games. It was like, go outside, roll around in the mud, jump down a hill, break your arm, all that kind of stuff. And then I, late teen, got a smartphone, all that. And I think my desire, my obsession with cymbals has come partly because I crave something slower and something that feels more meditative. And I think that even the desire for a handcrafted instrument of some kind, in essence, it touches a part of us that we're looking for something that is more real than this. We're looking for something that's tangible, that feels like, wow, there was someone who spent a lot of time and energy and care crafting this thing. And that relates to music too. It's like we have so much information, so much access to music, that are we really even studying the music? Are we sitting with it and really digesting pieces of music, learning how those musicians accomplished that feat? Or are we just kind of digesting a couple seconds of a song and then moving on? I had a friend who said that their younger sibling cannot even listen to a full song. It's
Really?
like the attention span is so little that she'll only listen to 30 seconds of a song before it's like, we got to skip it, and I think there are people that are seeing that trend and that pull from society to be more that way. And we're kind of revolting. So it's like, no, I'm not gonna do what you want me to do. I'm gonna go sit in my garage for 5 hours and do nothing but hammering. Maybe listening to music, maybe listening to silence, or just listening to the strokes of your hammer. And then people see that we're doing this, and it kind of touches something that, we want something that feels more real, feels more like it has care and love being poured into it. And I think that's part of the reason for this entire industry being the way that it is that we're touching something that is that people are wanting, that they have a lack.
Most people don't understand how things are made anymore. And
feel disconnected.
They're like, oh, I just go to the store and it comes from China. When I was growing up, you didn't buy anything that said made in China on it was going to break after a few days of playing with it or using it. And we're going to see onshoring of manufacturing back to the United States. Smaller companies are going to start making stuff. And because of the supply chain issues with COVID, you're going to see people, they're going to be like, yeah, all right, I'll pay $20 more for this because I'm going to be able to get it and it was made here. One of my daughter's boyfriends, and he's a mechanical engineer, and I'm in the garage and I'm making cymbals, and he said to me, how do you know when it's done?
The question.
And I have a mechanical engineering degree, so I can talk to him and I say, I said a lot of it is experience from me playing a lot of cymbals and working with people that did it before me. But there's rules with cymbals. They're not heavy duty guardrails because everybody hears things a little bit differently. But if you do this, and this, you get into the ballpark of what you're after.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but how do you know? And I said, because I play it. He wants to be able to measure it. He wants to say, it's between this tolerance and that tolerance. He's
Right.
like, how do you know what blanks to order? I said, I just know. I know from experience.
Yeah.
I know what thickness it needs to be for crashes and rides and hi-hats. And he's gonna come over again, and my daughter's like, he wants to see you make some stuff. I said, sure. Because when he had asked that question, I was in the middle of like finishing up stuff for a drum store, and I'm like, I can't talk right now.
Yeah.
I was in the zone, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't. We'll grab a beer or a glass of wine and talk about it at another time. But but people don't really understand. They're really wowed when they see somebody making something.
Yeah.
So but it's going to come back. Manufacturing is going to come back to the United States, not to the level that it was in the 1950s and 60s and early 70s, but it's going to come back. And people want handcrafted stuff. They like it. This was made based off of my my needs and my wants.
Yep.
It's like going to a restaurant and asking the chef to make something for you.
Yeah, who doesn't want that experience?
Right.
Obviously, sometimes we want to go to Five Guys and just get a burger.
Yep.
But then every now and then we're a little tired of that, and we want something catered. And I love that perspective of it. I think it's a very hopeful, positive way of looking at the future, because it's very easy in these times to just get kind of lost in like everything's falling apart or everything's going down the drain, you know. And I'm trying to keep that perspective of like there's still beauty in the world. Community and connection with other people is beautiful. Connection with musicians and music is beautiful. And it's like I feel like staying focused on that is the way forward, just to kind of get you through some of these weird times that we're in.
Water finds its own level, and when things get too chaotic and out of balance, it comes back into balance. This is going to sound corny or weird or whatever, but you know, this pandemic, we got to see during all the shutdown that the earth started to repair itself. You know,
oh yeah,
people realized that they needed more social interaction, that they started to crave it, where those type of creatures and people that were killing themselves at a corporate job didn't go back to it. They're like, you know what? I don't need to live on all this money that I'm making. I was able to live on a fraction of that. So you know what? I'm not going back and killing myself for this person over here. I'm gonna explore some stuff that I want to do. So it, you know, society finds its own balance, you know, and you hear about the airline industry, you know, the disruptions is because, you know what? I'm not going back to be an airline stewardess, or I'm going to retire early. I don't want to fly anymore. I don't want these back-to-back flights, you know? You know, a lot of people, my age when they were growing up, had one parent that stayed home all the time, and you could live on one salary. And I think people learned kind of how to make that work when they were forced to do it.
Right.
You know, and so what does that mean? It means that, you know, people are happier.
Right. Yeah.
You know, you don't, I was never one where I was going to work and work and work and then retire and do all the fun stuff that I want.
Yeah.
You know, I want to travel now. I want to get the good bottle of wine now. I don't want to wait. And one of the things that triggered that with me is that my father passed away in 1998. He had a massive heart attack and died. He didn't get to retire. He didn't ever own a brand new car. He didn't get to take the trips that he wanted to take. And I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not waiting to a number, an age where society says you can retire now.
You can start living your life now.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
You've given enough to us, and you can go live your life now. I totally agree with that.
You know, so I like making cymbals in my garage. I'm happier than I've ever been. Believe it or not.
That's awesome. Yeah, and the cymbal independent cymbal world is happier with you in it, and we're very blessed by your years of experience, your innovation. I'm not just saying this just to say it. I really mean it. You have drastically affected my life, and even like looking at how I developed my palette and my love for this instrument, and seeing people like you is seeing how you love the craft, love the art form, love the history of it. You know, you care about talking about Avadas and his stories, and then how it goes back farther than that. Like that's inspiring for me, because I want to be a part of the lineage. You know, I'm not trying to be in this to create my own little kingdom where I get everybody to buy from me because I'm the best. I don't care. You know, that's why I have this podcast and bring on other makers. It's like technically we're competitors, right? You know, like whose money are you going to give? Who are you going to give your money to? Me or Paul or Nikki Moon or Mangiello or all these things? But I don't really see it that way.
I don't see it that way either. And and thank you for the compliment. Okay. I'm just still trying to, I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't have all the answers, nor do I want them. But I'll give you a perfect example today. So I said I might be late to log on to the podcast, right? So my wife is buying a car. Okay. And it's a used car, but low miles. And we have a mechanic, here, literally up the street. And, he was looking at the car and he said, "Oh, okay. So, you know, the flanges with the exhaust system, they're kind of rusty and you might want to get those replaced." And he said, you know, if the dealership that you're buying the car from doesn't do it, you want to contact, you know, Lou's Exhaust here in North Plymouth. I live in Plymouth, Massachusetts now. So Can my mechanic do that work? Yep. Can lose exhaust do it better than him? Yes, he can. And that's why he recommended it. And I'm going to segue into cymbals right now. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was contacted by a drummer in Canada, and he had, I'll use this word because it's kind of funny. He had this fantasy that he was going to make cymbals. Okay.
Yeah.
And he bought like 20 or 30 blanks from Turkey, and he got the blanks, and then he realized cymbal making is it's not easy.
It's a little different.
Especially if you're starting from zero and have zero experience making anything, So he contacted me and said, "Hey, do you think I could send you these cymbals, these blanks, and maybe we can work out a deal where you can make me some stuff, and then, it's not full price or whatever." And I was like, "Oh boy." I said, "First of all, when did you buy these blanks and who did you buy them from?" So he gave me the information, and he had bought the blanks like 4 years ago. I go, I said, I can't work with them.
Yeah.
I said, the metal is so hard right now. I said, if I had an oven, I could re-anneal them, then quench them and soften them back down. I can't do it. Nor do I want to try. I don't want you to send me anything. I don't, because then I'm going to feel bad. I'm going to try. It's not going to work out, and everyone's going to get disappointed. So I said, Matt Nolan in England has a tempering furnace and a quench tank, and he can do 1 or 2 blanks at a time. I said, contact him and see if he'll be willing to work with you. So if I can't do something, I'm going to recommend somebody else.
Yeah.
To me, it's not about the money grab. It's not about that.
Right.
If you want me to make you a cymbal based off of my experience and my knowledge, okay, this is what it costs.
Yeah.
And that's how we'll do it. If I can't do it, then I'm not going to.
Yeah.
And
that's it. I've said on the podcast before, I've played enough of the independent makers' work to really see that we all have an individual voice with our instruments, and they carry something specific to the maker. And I want to help foster an environment where we think of it like the color palette, and we want different colors for our kit. And so we think, okay, Timothy Roberts has this certain vibe, and I would like one of those colors, and I want one of Paul's because his has got a certain vibe, and Mangiello and Collingwood and everybody, that all of my buddies, it's like I want us to think of it like that, because it's like artistry and like music. No 2 drummers are going to play the swing beat the same.
Yep. I was just thinking that exact correlation. I need to do something, if it's okay with you.
Yeah.
I need to big shout out to Nikki Moon. We had started talking while I was still employed at Zildjian, and we were scheduling a time in 2021 to get together, which was in March, just to, because he's local here in Massachusetts.
Right.
And unfortunately, my employment at Zildjian came to an end, and I reached out to him and said, I'm no longer with Zildjian. I don't know if you still want to get together. He goes, I want to get together with you even more now, because you're untethered to a brand. So he showed up to a place that I call it the Drum Cave, but it's actually on the 2nd floor of this building, where I have 4 drum sets set up.
Nice.
So he comes, and we were just going to hang. We have pizza and beer and just shoot the shit and get to know each other. Well, he brought an anvil and a hammer and a couple blanks. He says, do you want to hammer some blanks today? I said, yes, I do.
Yeah.
And he was kind enough to say, if you like, I can leave the anvil with you, because I don't use this on a daily basis. Usually when I travel somewhere and I need to get some work done, I bring this with me. So he did that. He left that anvil with me and let me use it. And he was a big help in the very, very beginning for me to kind of navigate how to get things, because again, I was spoiled for 32 years. I had a ready-made cymbal factory at my disposal, and I could go in at any time, any day or night. If I needed to let myself in, I could. And he helped me. He helped me quite a bit over the years. He's a really, really, really good soul. And
He
I'm
is.
sorry, I'm going to try not to get choked up because I'm a sappy old dude now, but I'm really, really grateful for him.
Yeah. And I would agree with all of that. He's helped me in the
Mm-hmm.
past. He he also makes damn fine sounding cymbals. Like,
Without a doubt, does he make great cymbals?
I mean, it's the amount of refinedness. There's a level of craftsmanship and refinery, if that's a word,
mhm.
that people like Nikki have, people like you have. That when I play one of those cymbals, it's like it's it's everything a cymbal should be. You know,
Don't
Nikki is.
sell yourself short. You have some really pretty sounding cymbals. Remember, I
Thank
made you
you.
put one up on the stand in Nashville. I'm
Yes,
like, put this one up.
yes, you need to have this one on the stand. Yeah,
Put it on a stand so people will play. Not that the others,
right.
um, they all sounded great, but I've played tens of thousands of cymbals, and there's some that just for whatever reason just have this extra magic in them. And
Right. Yeah.
put this one out so people can play this one.
And
Cause,
it really is the thing where, we're so close to our own work
mhm,
that we don't have perspective. I heard a friend of mine describe it like, if you're the artist painting your mural, like you're this close to your canvas
right.
painting, and because you're getting all of the details and you're trying to work everything out. And sometimes you need someone who's standing 10 feet behind to say, hey, that's good, or hey, that's crap,
Right,
whatever.
right.
You
Or
need,
you're done. You're done.
or you're finished, which is a
You're
huge.
finished.
Yes.
Leon used to do that for me because I would want to tweak a little bit more. He goes, "You're done. You hit it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're at the sound that we want to get. Don't do any more, because sometimes if you go too far, um, you get exponentially far away from actually what you tried to accomplish. So you
Yes.
have to say,
Yeah.
this is done.
I'm learning to leave in things that I might have considered to be flaws.
Yeah.
Uh Tones, sounds, pockets of tension that maybe aren't quite ironed out or balanced,
Mm-hmm.
because I've found that the more that you tweak, the more you just end up sending it in a different direction, and it becomes something else.
Right.
In the
Yep.
early days, I would send it way far and it would become unusable. But nowadays, it's like if I have that moment of going, I really like the way this sounds, but what if I, and the second I give into that question, it usually has a trail that just leads it to be something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, like, people talk about the old K sound, they talk about complex, dirty, dark sounds. That's like very, very, Meinl has really captured that vibe and presented it well to the customer, because people are buying Meinls like crazy right now.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
I find that those dark, dirty, complex sounds they come from maybe cymbals not being balanced all that well, or having soft spots or issues with the shape, or
Mm-hmm.
and all these kinds of things. And so it's like learning how to add or leave in just enough of that to give it the vibe. And it's also dependent, obviously, on the sound you're trying to make. You were talking about getting clean sounds or
Mm-hmm.
dark and dirty sounds, and you can do it. You can do either one with an independent maker.
There's only two sounds. There's a
Yeah.
bright, pretty sound and a dark, dirty sound. Which one do you want? There's only two ways to hammer a cymbal. Put hammer rows in, or put hammer marks everywhere. That's it. I've written reports at Zildjian saying, this is it.
That's
These
it.
are the options.
Wow.
If you hammer, rows that radiate from the cup out to the edge, it's a row.
Yeah.
And that gives you a certain sound. I do want to say this about perceived flaws in cymbals.
Yeah.
Okay?
Tell me.
I don't chase after pits, and I don't chase after little hammer marks where the oxide doesn't come out. It's not a flaw. It doesn't affect the sound. I actually had a 20-inch cymbal that had it was a pit that you could see. And, Steve Maxwell had ordered some cymbals from me, and I put a Post-it note on it, and I said, I know this is here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not chasing after this, because if I chase after this, it was a piece of steel, either from the crucible when they poured the casting, or from when they were using the metal rakes to take it out of the oven in Turkey. Okay. I see this. I know this is here. I'm sending it to you anyway because it sounds good. if you can't sell this to your customers, send it back to me, and I will credit you, or I'll write you a check for the money that you. But this is a really good sounding cymbal.
Yeah.
That cymbal's long gone. Somebody owns it now. And all the drummers want is for the craftsman to say, that's not going to be a problem.
Yep.
Okay. And listen, if it cracks because of something that you see in the cymbal, I'll replace it. I understand. You're spending a lot of money on this, but it's not a flaw. I'm part of some Facebook groups where I'll get on and say, listen, guys, this is not a problem.
Not a big
It's
deal.
not going to be a problem. Go play your cymbal. I promise that you're never going to have a problem with that. There was a I think it was a Boss for a cymbal where there was just a skip in the lathing and there was some oxide left over. And the guy's like, is this the crack? I said, no, it's fine. Just
do you
play
like
your
it?
cymbal.
Does it
right.
sound...
Do you like it?
Do you like it? Yeah, I think of that too. You want in the beginning, you want to chase after, you want to have the facility, the tool in your tool belt to be able to get a cymbal to sit flat. You want to be able to have the tool in your tool belt to get the shape you're aiming for. All that is just the technique and stuff. But at the end of the day, we hit the cymbal on a stand. We're not putting it on a table and checking. That doesn't, you could argue that maybe it has the tiniest little slight relationship to the sound, but it's on a stand. We're playing it. And does it sound the way you want it to sound, or does it inspire you to play?
Right.
And
I mean,
really
if the cymbal's warped, then it's going to have a wonky sound. But I mean, if you're putting it on a surface stone or even on a piece of glass, the best way to measure flatness, cheap money, is buy a glass tabletop. I mean, glass has to be flat.
Yeah.
And you put the cymbal on it. And I mean, and if it's rocking, you're like, well, I got more hammering to do. Right. But if you have, you can slide a piece of paper under a area this big, don't go chasing that. You can't hear that.
Yeah.
You can't. It's like when people say, I want 1863 grams, not 1883. I'm like, you can't hear that. I can't hear that.
Yeah.
And I've hit a shit ton more cymbals than you have.
Right,
you can't hear that.
Right.
Yeah. And it's not, I'm not disparaging the drummers, but they get in their own heads about what they think is something.
Right.
And it's really not. That's not it. And again, the amount of Zildjians I've played that came from Turkey, okay, the percentage of good ones, they're the good ones because those are the ones that were used on recordings or exist now with famous drummers. I've played a lot of bad sounding cymbals that came out of Turkey, out of that Zildjian factory. They weren't happening. They're just, there were no drumsticks over there. They sat down, they hammered it. That's good. Lathe that up, stick it in the crate, send it to Gretsch. Because we got to get, there's a form in there. Hey, we got to get this order out.
Yep.
Manufacturing is manufacturing when you get into something that's bigger than what you and I are doing.
Right.
And
that might be the biggest point to why buy from an independent maker versus a big thing. You might have 30, 40 people have their hands on that one piece, and it's because it's just going down an assembly line being pushed out. But guys like us were musicians first. I mean, you talk another podcast about how you were a drummer and you just wanted a summer gig. Right?
Yeah. And I was going to be 3 months, and I spent 32 years there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when we make cymbals, it's that we're putting in our taste, we're listening, we're playing. I take my cymbals to my gigs in different venues. And so I'll play a cymbal outside and go, wow, this is great here. Put it inside. Okay, then maybe there's a little bit of a hum or something that's more prevalent in a tight, louder space, but it's not a big deal if it's outside. So maybe this is going to be this type of cymbal, or maybe I find out it's not done. I go back and tweak it. It's like, that's what you get is someone that's going to make it, but also play it. We're dealing with shape and sound with this art form. And
I don't have any cymbals of my own that I'm making to play yet. Everything that I've made has sold to somebody. So, You know, because people come and see me. Like I had a gig last night. I play with 3 different bands, and they're like, you don't work there anymore. I go, well, these are the cymbals. They're all prototypes of, you know, K custom hybrids or A custom rezos and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, this is what I play in these situations because it's what I need. It's the tools I need. And I haven't been able to make myself my own set yet.
Yeah.
Because I've been fulfilling people's drummers' requests, which is
Yeah.
it's kind of ironic, but I'm extremely proud of those 32 years. I mean, I'll talk a buzzard off a meat wagon about projects and sounds and stuff like that. You know, it's part of me.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, now I'm doing this, which is really, really fantastic.
Yeah. So what's the future? Tell me about the future of Cymbal Craftsman. What do you see this being? Or are you just kind of riding just on the ride, see where it leads?
I'm just making cymbals, and I'm going to do it until nobody gives a shit that I make cymbals anymore. It really comes down to that. You know, it's like if somebody said you can't play the drums anymore or you can't listen to music. Forget it. I'd shoot myself.
Yeah.
You know, why do I do it? Because I like it. It's a itch I have to scratch. You know, I tell people there's no universe where I live, where I exist, where I'm not making cymbals, whether it's a hobby or you know, at a cymbal company. You know, the universe kind of points you in a direction and says, this is what you're going to do. You know, I didn't win the $1 billion jackpot, you know, for Mega Millions the other night. And there's a reason for that, because I'm not supposed to have that money.
Right.
You know, I'm supposed to be doing this.
Yeah. That's a freeing way of living your life, where you can just, you can kind of take the pressure off a little bit and just be like, you know, you're taking care of what you have in front of you, or what you have. You know, it's like you take care of that. A lot of us spend time bemoaning what we don't have, or lamenting that we aren't famous, or we aren't this, or we aren't that. It's like, at the end of the day, just take care of what you've been given, do the best you can with it, and that's really all you can do. You know,
I wanted to be a famous drummer. It didn't happen.
Me too.
You know, but there's more people that know me now through, you know, my career at Zildjian and then what I'm doing now. I mean, I couldn't ask for more. It's really sometimes I'm like, all right, I'm just a guy, I put my pants on just like you, and I make cymbals every day. You know, there was a tour that came through Zildjian one time, and I was going from the testing room over to some hammers, and I was going to lay some cymbals, and this guy was on this tour, and he just like all the breath came out of his body. He goes, oh my God, you're Paul. I've seen your videos. And I'm like, okay, what's your name? He told me his name. I said, I will be back. I have to go do something, but I will catch up with this tour and I will talk to you, you know? And that I wasn't able to do that with people from Zildjian while I was coming up. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
You know, there was no chance of meeting somebody that made your musical instrument, you know, when I was a beginner drummer. So I wanted to make sure that he was here. He came to see the factory on a tour, and for some reason he needed to speak with me, and I wanted to make sure that I made the time that he got that opportunity.
Yeah.
And he did, and he's, you know, just going on, and he says, can I email you? I said, yeah, our email addresses are public, and as I have time, I will absolutely love to talk to you. I'm just like you. I just work here.
Yeah.
I play drums, you know, and, you know, when I go to other factories, I geek out. If I go to machine shops, I geek out. I love to see how things are made, and I like to talk to people on factory floors, and I want to know people's stories. You know, how did you get into making drums? Why do you make drums? Why do you make drums that way? How did you get into cymbal making? I mean, why?
Yeah.
You know, what's worse than telling your parents you want to play the drums? Tell them you want to be a cymbal maker. That's like saying, I want to be a philosopher.
Right. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of money in that.
Right. Right. It's true. It's true. And it's like, I look at it, and for me, it was not what I chose. It kind of was like life circumstances led me and shaped me and molded me. And I look at what I have now, and it's a small operation. I got a couple employees, and I pinch myself that I have what I have because it's a gift. It really is a gift. It's not, and I'm not trying to like come off as humble here just as a ploy. I really genuinely mean that I wake up kind of going, wow, I get to do this because this is not the
Hmm.
life I envisioned for myself. And it seems like you have sort of a similar
Right.
story. It's like you did not see yourself here, and I wonder, like, do you get as much out of making cymbals as you got out of and get out of playing music? Has it become something that you love just as much, or love in a different way? Or
I love making cymbals more than playing music.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
love to play music, because it was my first, playing the drums was my first girlfriend. I say a joke about that, my first love. And then it morphed into this thing. And it's really great because I've always been like a tinkerer. I like to take things apart and know how they work, and cymbals were like, well, there's no assembly required. So why
yeah,
does this sound the way this sounds? And how can it be repeatable? I mean, it just seems
yeah,
like a mystery. So I fell into it because I'm naturally curious.
yeah,
That's the type of person I am. And I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful that I get to do this every day. Um,
yeah,
most people go to a job and they do it, with the hopes that at some finish line, I get to live my life, like you said.
yeah.
And that doesn't work for me,
No, no way.
you
And
know,
that's the good
and
thing about COVID. COVID taught us to kind of take a step back, like you
mhm,
were saying before, like take a step back and ask, like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing it this
right.
in this way? Maybe there's another way. Maybe there's a way I can enjoy my life more. And it's
Hmm.
risky because my wife and I are talking about her stepping back from her nursing job
Hmm.
and coming in to help me build the business and be kind of my right hand partner in the business side
Hmm.
as she obviously already is in life. And it's scary because it's like, okay, we got to figure out how to navigate the loss of that income, but the
Which is a
freedom.
very, very, very steady income. I mean, she can
Yes.
literally walk into any hospital, doctor's office. I don't know where
Yeah.
disciplined, but they hire her on the spot.
On the spot. And they are also currently offering unbelievable incentives to work more.
Hmm.
So she could call them up right now and say, I want to work more hours, and if she hits a certain overtime thing, her pay doubles. And
Hmm.
then if she hits another threshold, it's time and a half, then doubled. And then it's unbelievable. If you want to make really good money, go into the nursing field, and you get to help people, which is great. But
Yeah.
uh,
I'll say this too with regard to my career, my 32-year career. I wanted to retire there. I mean,
mm,
and that means that they would have found me dead on the floor of the factory, you know. Um, so I had no intention of um, things changing at that company where I would be thrust into doing cymbal making on my own. That really wasn't in my plan. I loved working there. I love that brand.
mm,
And I still do. I actually, this is a Zildjian pint glass. I know a lot of people that for whatever reason don't work somewhere, and they take all anything related to that and they throw it away.
right.
No, no, no. I look at this logo, and it brings me happiness because of what I was part of.
Yeah, yeah.
You
And
know,
you definitely speak with honor. Because it's very possible for people to just disparage the place they
Mhm.
were at if they feel like they were done wrong. It's like, but like you are very honoring, and you do I live that because we've had other conversations not on a podcast, where you could have been like, rah, rah, this
Mhm.
place, but like you speak with honor. You say, this is what happened. I'm grateful, and just moving on, and that's just the way it is, and
The
that's
only person that's angry would be me if I'm spiteful,
right.
and that serves no purpose.
Yeah. They
You know,
say bitterness is like drinking a poison and hoping the other person gets killed by it,
right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, no, I have. I point to the other side of my playroom here, the unfinished side, and I have bags with cymbals in there, and they're like the first one of something that was prototyped. You know, and I'll go and I'll pull stuff out and reminisce. I'm like, wow, that that was a fun project. Or this project here, I had like 15 guys on the factory floor say that's not going to work. And I have it, and it did work, you know? And, you know, people say, well, how did you know it was going to work? I said, I didn't know it wasn't going to work. You know, when you make something and it didn't come out the way that you wanted, you don't do that again. Right. You say, okay, these steps, they didn't work together to get to the sound we wanted. So let's try it again until you get it.
Yeah.
You know, that's just how I'm wired.
Yeah.
You know, my wife hates it. You know, if something breaks in the house, like I'm famous for taking the stove apart or the dishwasher or whatever. The dryer, I had my dryer apart because I had to replace a piece. Actually, the belt that just turns the drum, you have to take your dryer apart to replace that.
Yeah.
And she's like, why don't you just go buy another dryer? Why can't we just go get another one? I said, well, the part costs $40. And you know what? Yeah. I might learn something as I take this apart. And I mean, I spent some hours doing it. I'm not an appliance repairman.
Right. Right.
But there's a sense of accomplishment. It goes back to how people don't know how things are made. You know, totally. I want to know. And then there's people that are just happy to call a repairman and they come in and they fix it. You know, two things that I won't do. I don't do electrical work.
Electrical and plumbing, right?
Plumbing, I'll do minimal plumbing, you know, but if there's a serious problem, I don't have the tools or the knowledge. Or if you get into a situation where it's like, all right, this is what was supposed to happen with the plumbing, I don't know what to do. Then you're calling a plumber anyway, and then they come in and they yell at you for what? I got to fix your mess.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I think that's I don't think I talk a lot about what is expedient versus what is playing the long game. So it's not very it's not expedient to tinker and say what if this works, because you're going to find that nine times out of 10 it's not going to work, and you're gonna find you'll step back and go, wow, I just did that. It took 5 hours and it didn't work, or so some people will go, it's a waste, it's this. But it's not a waste. If you pay attention, you know, that's the only reason I was never trained to build drums. I have very minimal training in making cymbals. And for me, what's gotten me through and gotten me to the place I'm at is really just that mindset, the tinkering mindset, and a ton of failure, tons. But every time I just kind of like brush it off and I kind of laugh about it and go, wow, that didn't work. But I now know this and this and this and this. So the next time I'll avoid all these pitfalls. And then the next time it's a little quicker. Maybe I still fail, but I did it faster or whatever. And that's a great mentality for music as well. It's like, it's try things, fail at things, and you will get better. Right. I'm a testament to that because I'm not naturally gifted in a lot of areas. And I feel like I'm lucky in that I just have this mindset, and this mindset kind of has carried me. I'm just going to see how far it takes me, you know?
I've had apprentices that would build prototypes and, you know, bring them in for, you know, a few of us to play them. And we'd say, it's not what you said it was. And they get all discouraged and they wouldn't want to do it again. I said, well, wait a minute. Now you know what doesn't work. Don't do that again. Take the information. You know, I've built cymbals for famous drummers, and they'd call me up and say, no, it's not happening. And what I learned to ask is, okay, what's missing? Let's not talk about what you have. What's missing from that cymbal that you need to have? Are there characteristics in that piece of metal that I made for you that do work? And what more do you need? And that was very, very helpful in my development, because, you know, I was a drummer. I didn't know how to fix things. I didn't know how to make anything. I barely make a sandwich. Yeah. You know, but if you have that mindset, okay, all right, this one's not working. What's not working?
You kind of detach your sense of self-worth from it. It's not about like, you know, it's not about that. It's just a matter of like, take it on at face value for what it is. Okay, this doesn't work. Well, let's discover what isn't working about it so we can figure something else out. And People get caught up when they get too emotionally tied into my value as a human being is tied in with the success or failure of my project.
The drummer doesn't hate you because you didn't knock it out of the park. You're the vehicle to help them get to the sound that they don't have yet. That's all. So, okay, let's do it again, and I tell people, they're like, oh, I want 22-inch, Carope style ride at this weight or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And if you get it and it's not quite right, you send it back to me and I'll tweak it. I don't want you to be unhappy. I've talked to several drummers in the last couple of weeks that have had stuff made that didn't work. And they kind of vented their frustration to me, and they're like, well, I'm not sure that I'll ever get what I want. I said, well, here's how it's going to work with me. You're going to describe what you want. And then, if you're okay with whatever the cost of the final product is, then I'll go and try to build it. But if I get to a point where I don't think it's what you asked for, you're never going to get it. And then if you do get it, and it kind of ticks all the boxes from what I understood from our conversation, and you need a little bit thinner, or you need, you want more hammering done to it or whatever, send it back. There's no extra charge. You just got to pay for the shipping. Because we use words to describe things. And I hope I'm not undermining all the independence where I'm saying,
no,
I
did the same thing, actually.
I can't charge you more money for something that didn't meet your expectations.
Right.
So, it's tough. We're describing sounds with adjectives, and we all have our own definitions of what those words mean. So, I like to have a lot of phone calls with people, especially if you send me something to modify. I want to know what you don't like about the cymbal, because obviously you're not playing it and you want it to be something else. Okay, so I write it all down, and then I get the cymbal and I evaluate it. So I understand from my expertise of making cymbals what that piece of metal is doing. Then I go back to the notes and say, okay, what I just played, does it jive with what this drummer described to me? And then ultimately for me, there's another phone call, and I approach it like how I approached it with cymbal making with artists. There was a lot of talking and a little bit of cymbal making. I didn't jump into it and then hope it came out the right way. I did a lot of upfront work. So it worked out for me. It worked out for me when I was at Zildjian, and this is how I'm going to move forward with it.
And so people to find you, where if someone wants to get their cymbal modified, wants to get you to make them a cymbal, where do they get in touch with you?
I don't have a website. I literally, out of the gate was overwhelmed with interest and work. I just have an email address. It's paul@cymbalcraftsman.com. Will there be a website that people can go on to? Yes, it probably won't exist until sometime next year. It's not that I don't want to do it, but I don't have the time to take away from the cymbal making and the requests to do it, because, I'm a one-man show. I don't have any employees, and I don't know where this is going to take me. But right now I'm going to do it on my own until I can bring in somebody else.
And it's getting someone else to do all of the technical stuff, because teaching someone to do what you do is possibly impossible, possibly out of the question.
There's people I have friends that have come by and they're like, well, can't you just get a machine to do that? I'm like, yeah, I can, and I probably will for certain sound aspects. I mean, I literally know how to make cymbals every possible way with every piece of machinery that exists. And that's something that I want to say, and I don't want to belabor the podcast, but if the independent craftsman decides, I want a hand hammer to get to what you asked for, that's great. If he says, I want to use a power hammer to get to that, then that's the best way to do it. I approach cymbal making at Zildjian with what's the best way to get to that sound.
Right.
So, computer hammers, power hammers. I had a very nice power hammer at Zildjian that we did hammering on the Karope cups, and I also used it for some hammering in the body too to get some to certain sounds. You want the independent cymbal maker to have a lot of tools in their tool box to get to the sound that you're looking for, because it doesn't diminish the quality of work that you use something that might be powered. Okay.
Right.
When you're making a brass alloy or a B8 alloy or B12 alloy, there's a certain way to form the metal that's a really, really great approach, and all the cymbal makers use that, and that's how they get the sound started for you.
Right.
Yeah. So it doesn't, what am I trying to say? There's no such thing as machine-made cymbals. Okay. We're a machine. A hammer in my hand is a simple machine. Okay. They're all good approaches. And I'm speaking from a lot of experience. So if an independent wants to go out and buy some sort of power hammer to work the metal during some of the steps, that's a really, really good thing. I don't have a power hammer yet.
Yeah.
Do I want one? Yes. Right now I don't have the finances to buy it, because the one that I want to get is very expensive.
Yeah.
So, and then there's some other stuff that, if this thing does go in a direction that's really good, there's some other stuff that I would like to also have built, for me. And it's not, one of the things that I miss, I'll say it this way, is the lathes that I used at Zildjian. And one of the most important things is there was a pneumatic plunger that held the cymbal on the spinning backer.
Yeah, you didn't have to sit there.
Putting a nut on and off the lathe. I mean, to me, that's inefficient.
Yeah.
And I do it now because that's the tool I have.
Right.
And I don't complain about it, but I do miss flipping a lever and that thing getting out of the way, and I can just get in there and I don't even have a brake on my motor. We spoke about this. I mean, I literally I slow it down with my hand. So will I get like a super stop electronic brake eventually? Of course I will.
Yeah.
Because I want it to stop now so I can look at it and then power it back up if I need to.
Right.
So these are not, none of these tools take away from the quality of a cymbal sound. I'm not sure where this came from, and this machine made, and machines can't do anything without humans.
That's true.
A lot of the cymbal factories, they don't shut the lights off and they run themselves. It's not a warehouse that have pick and place robots that go to a spot on a shelf and come out.
Right.
It's not like that.
No, and I think it's maybe.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump on that.
No, I like that
tangent.
I like that tangent because I think I've talked about it before too. It's I'm gonna make zero bones about the fact that when I have my machine hammer, I'm gonna be showing that thing off. I'm not gonna be feeling like I gotta hide it so people think, ooh, mysterious cymbal maker sitting always with his hand. I think it's just a marketing thing. We got it in our heads that like the bigger manufacturers are just cranking them out by the machine and there's nobody playing them. Like you guys had it, like Leon was the cymbal tester, right?
Yeah, it was him, and there was another guy named Jeff, and there was another guy named Eric. There were 3 cymbal testers. And let me tell you, I'll say this. If the cymbals didn't come out the right way, they got cut up. Okay. There was no agonizing, let's look at it again tomorrow. No. If they weren't happening, they got scrapped. And we told people afterwards.
Yeah.
You can't, make something sound good that's dog shit if it's in little pieces.
Yeah. Right.
It's gone,
It's
and
gone
I was in charge of quality for many, many years at Zildjian. If I got a call to come into the testing room and there was a wonky batch of cymbals, I'd go cut them up.
Yeah, yourself, right?
You're not going to try to convince yourself that, these are okay, and
Right.
an 18-inch crash cymbal that someone's going to spend $300 on that doesn't sound right. I can't sleep at night with that.
Yeah.
So I'll tell a quick story. I know you have to end this, but when I was working with Bill Stewart on the K
Don't make
Custom.
this story quick. I love Bill Stewart.
Okay,
Please
all right.
tell the full version.
So we were working on the K Custom Dry Complex 2. And instead of having two weights, there was just one weight, and there was a 20, a 22, and a 24, and it had a shallower bell. And the reason Bill wanted a 24 is because we had come out with the 24-inch K Light Ride. And he goes, I kind of like this, but it's kind of a little too pedestrian for me. Can we do it in my design? Can we make a 24? I said, sure. So we did that. And then we made the 22s. He goes, oh, I like these 22s better with this bell. And that's kind of the bell shape that I originally wanted in it. But we sold a lot of those other ones, didn't we? And I said, yeah, we did.
Yeah.
So 22s and 24s came out great. The prototypes for the 20s, fantastic. Then, what we would do is we would do a first production run where the artist would come in and approve it to make sure, because that's when the guys on the floor made it, not me. Okay.
Yeah.
So 20s came in, and I had played the 20s before I went and picked Bill up at the hotel to bring him over to go through all the first run batches. And I knew they weren't happening. And we go in the room, and he plays the 22s and he plays the 24s. And I said, Bill, I'm not going to waste your time. These 20s, I don't think they're right, And he says, well, let me play them, and he played them, and he looked at me. I go, yeah, these aren't right. I said, I'll be right back. He says, okay. And I wheeled the cart out, and I went out to the chopper, and I chopped up 60 cymbals. Was it 66 cymbals? And came back. He goes, well, where did you go? I said, I cut up the cymbals. He said, what? I said, they didn't sound right, did they? He said, no. I said, well, we're going to do it again. He goes, but is somebody going to get in trouble? I said, no. I said, the worst thing is for us to send those out into the marketplace and they don't sell.
Yeah.
So, and then you did the second batch, and they came out better.
So with the two, because I owned a 2 at one point, and I made a tribute to Bill, kind of using the design you came up with. And I made mine a little bit thinner to get like a bit more of a mellow sound. And, I discovered later on after studying Bill, he had those weights in mind because he needed them for the volume. Like he needed to cut through the Steve Swallow and Schofield amps in there. Like it needed to be clear. And so by the time it went through, there was a clarity to the sound. There was that complexity, that trash, but the click was still really present. And so I was making, a version that was for lighter playing that didn't need to cut as much. The 2 and the 1, I've heard a lot of people kind of say both things about which one was better. What was the difference between those?
Well, the version 1 had 2 weights. Okay. Originally,
medium thin and thin.
Yeah. So correct. There was never going to be a medium thin. So he had a weight in mind. Bill had old Ks that had an umbrella shape to them, and he also was a fan of the K Jazz Ride. Okay, from the early 80s. He owned some of those, and that had a larger bell in it. So we kind of modeled the Dry Complex 1 after that kind of jazz ride, the early American K Jazz Ride. And he says, I like them thin. And the curvature affords a good stick sound. And the knock that you hear while he's playing, it comes out of the cup in his hand, not the cymbal.
Yep.
So making these cymbals, and I said to him, I said, oh, and another thing that he did was he would put 3 or 4 felts on and crank the cymbal down, and that would give him a gated crash sound.
Yep.
So that it didn't linger while he was playing. So a very, very unique approach to cymbal playing and how he had it on the stand and whatnot. And I said, Bill, these are thin. I pulled out my phone and did some math because I can't do the grams in my head because I'm a pounds ounces guy. So the thin was 2268. So I said, we might want to offer one that's just a little bit heavier, or there's going to be drummers that can't play this. It's going to be too wild for them. And he said, okay. So you had the thin, which was 5 pounds, and you had the medium thin, which was a quarter of a pound heavier, was 5 pounds, 4 ounces. And that did the trick, because the people that did have good technique and wanted that sound bought the thin, and the people that liked Bill Stewart's sound and weren't as sophisticated in their drumming bought the medium thin. And I had a lot of drummers yell at me at trade shows, sales events. I hate you for designing that cymbal, because I love Bill Stewart so much, but I can't play that cymbal. It's just, it's not within my capabilities, basically, is what they were saying. They didn't hate me.
Right.
They hated the fact that now the sound was available.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get it. So, and I would say, well, did you buy one? Yeah, I bought one. And I said, well, keep playing. I said, the only way to get better with your technique is to play. Just play. Yep. And if you like the cymbal sound, then you're going to want to play it more, Yeah.
And I had a medium thin, and it was not, I couldn't play it like Bill. I couldn't get Bill's sound. First gig, it was the first day I got it. I put it on my set, played it. The saxophonist turned around and was like, and because it was just a very live room.
Oh yeah.
And I was playing a medium thin, and I was trying to, I didn't have good technique. So I'm sitting playing the best I can. And he goes, he does this. And he goes, don't play that. And so that was the point. I was like, I can't sound like Bill Stewart. But yeah, I never got my hands on a thin. I played one or two of the thins, and they were like, okay, that's right.
I'm going to pick this up. So I have, can you see that?
Oh, wow.
That's from the very first batch of 22s.
Wow.
The only reason it's in a frame, it has a crack in the edge that you can't hear it. I saw it as I was putting the cymbal back on the cart. So I took it. He goes, oh, what do you mean? I said, it's got a little crack on the edge. He says, can you fix it? I said, no, it's too far in. So I had him sign it. So this is one of the very few cymbals that I designed with an artist that I had signed. And I'm like, I'm going to frame this.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yep.
I almost took it out of the frame to play it the other day.
Ooh.
And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. I know what it sounds like.
One day you will, maybe. That's awesome. I mean, I made a YouTube video, and it's to date the best YouTube video I ever made. I entitled it. I'll send it to you after this. It's entitled "The Bill Stewart Ride Sound." This was back before I feel like I've got much more facility as a maker now, but it was my very first attempt. I made 2 of these rides that were my tribute to the Bill Stewart sound. You'll see in the video, I turn it around. It's got the unlathed band at the edge. The unlathed portion in the center of the cymbal, which I don't know, was that version 1? Did it have an unlathed underside of the bell?
Version 1 and version 2 did. The 20-inch didn't on the bottom. The version 2, it had just a kind of a spiral groove in the cup and in the body.
Gotcha.
Because when we left it with those bands on the 20, it was they weren't dry, they were dead.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So that helped open them up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's a huge inspiration for me. So I'll say one big thank you for that, because that sound, Bill's cymbal sound, has been inspiring to me to no end. And my favorite record is the trio Swallow and Schofield En Route, the live trio album. Favorite record, one of my favorite records ever. And I just, I would pore over that record and try to make cymbals that sounded like that. And, I would look up YouTube videos of you talking about, just try to find videos of you talking about the dry complex. And I scoured the internet, trying to find one, that whole thing. And I recently asked you about the Brian Blade sound, because you have,
I've played those cymbals.
You've played those cymbals. So, you told me over text, high profile like Bill's.
Yep.
And that's what, like you said, you can get away with thinner weights with a more umbrella shaped profile, because it's going to bring the stick sound higher. So you get that clarity that you need. Otherwise, like we all know, like
It's muddy. It gets muddy if the cymbal's too low and there's no weight there. You won't hear the stick at medium to higher volume. So, and again, I learned this from Leon. He says you can bring that shape up. Bring that shape up. You can afford at that weight. You can give it more height and it won't sound funny. If you have a heavy cymbal that has a really high curvature, Armon Zildjian used to say it sounds like crows are coming over. Caw, caw, caw. You don't want it. It doesn't sound good. But with thinner cymbals, you can afford to bring the shape up because you get a good stick sound, but you don't get these weird, wonky overtones.
Yeah.
And again, when somebody's trying to do something, and I have some knowledge to share, I'm going to share it because you're going to figure it out anyway.
Right.
So I don't want you to take a 24-inch blank that you spent, couple $100 on a blank, and then it doesn't come out the way that you want.
Right.
It's the same with I had a what's his name, a young gentleman named Ryan Hayden. Is that his name?
Yeah,
you know him. He contacted me. He contacted me about the lathe that I had built, and he wanted to know, because I have it's a motor with a pulley system. Yours is direct drive.
Yeah.
Nicky Moon's is direct drive. And he says, I want to build something, and can you help me? I said, yep. And I took pictures of my motor. I took pictures of my lathe, and I sent it to him. I said, you are absolutely not to order this motor. Do not order this. This motor is 3,450 RPMs. Do not buy this. I said, I can lathe at these speeds because I grew up lathing at these speeds.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I taught him about the pulleys and the calculations. This is a very, very simple, this is a 3-inch pulley here. This is a 12-inch pulley, and this knocks down the speed, but it's still spinning at like 849 RPMs. I said, I do not want to find out that you're spinning your cymbals faster than 400 RPMs. Okay, so here's the name of the motor company that I bought this, because you can just, plug it into your wall at home.
Right.
But buy the one that's 1750, and then, get a 12-inch pulley or 14-inch pulley on the shaft. Start there. Because if you hurt yourself, I won't forgive myself.
Right. Yeah.
Because everybody, when I posted a picture of my lathe, Matt Nolan and Matt Bettis and Nicky Moon, they're like, wow, that's fucking fast. I go, that's Zildjian fast.
Yeah.
And
I could do this. I could do this.
I can't. Doing it slower would bother me.
Yeah.
If it was slower. Like I got to lathe a cymbal at Nicky Moon's place down in New Jersey. I went down. He helped me get some blanks, and I went down to pick them up, and I want to see his shop. And he goes, do you want to lathe? I go, yeah, I want to lathe. Lathing is like breathing to me. And he, I'd never used his tools or his lathe or his tool rest, but I think I told you the first 7 years of me lathing, I lathed like 550,000 cymbals.
Yeah.
So I don't care. I don't care what the lathe is, what carbide chisel you give it to me. I know what to do.
Yeah.
And he just I think he took some pictures. I don't know if he took some pictures of me. I'm like, you can't take any pictures.
Yeah.
But he was watching. He's like, holy shit. He says, you don't know this machine. I said, listen, it's a cymbal and I know how to lathe.
Yeah.
And then I lathe the bottom, lathe the top, and I said, well, how do you smooth the edge? And he actually taught me how to smooth the edge, because I throw cymbals on an edging machine that Zildjian had, And I said, well, why don't you do it? And you can teach me something. And then we played it, and he goes, holy shit. And I said, what? He goes, it sounds like a Zildjian. I go, well, yeah.
Yeah.
See what he goes, he goes, but I hammered it. I go, I know. Yeah. Because it was a 20 that he had. And he says, do you want to lathe it? I said, yeah. And then he sent me a video a couple days later where it had started to open up, and he goes, wow, that's really, really great. I said, you should sell it. He goes, no way am I going to sell this.
Yeah, this one's mine. That's what he said.
And he said, the way that you lathe is not how I lathe. I go, yeah, but it was the way that I was taught by the guys that were doing it. I'm just doing stuff the way that I've done it for 3 decades.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you sure you don't want to sell that? Somebody might like it. You can make another one.
Yeah. But I can't lathe like you. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
he's taller than me. So I'm like, I need to stand on something. I'm like 5'7" maybe. So he got this 6x6 piece of wood, like you'd build a deck with, and I stood on it so I could lathe,
Wow. So I'm interested with the fast speeds. Do you get chatter, like issues with chatter happening?
No, it's all how fast you're going to cut. I mean, I had a 20-inch cymbal that I made recently that had a little chatter on the bell. I was going after something. I heard some clicking. I'm like, oh, that's a little pit, and these cymbals are going to be made for this drummer, and I got a little bit of chatter. And chatter doesn't hurt, by the way, whoever's listening to this. Yeah. No effect. It's not a quality issue. It's not a sound problem. No. And no, I don't get chatter at those speeds. But you have to remember, when I was taught how to lathe, that was the speed of all the lathes at Zildjian. So it's just what it was. And whoever was teaching me at that time said, this is how you're going to approach this size or this model or whatever. And all chatter is that the tool and the cymbal is heating up, and the cutting tool is bouncing on the surface of the cymbal. That's all that it is. And I've gotten some chatter around the hole on the top side, and I just take it off and I sand it down and I go back and cut it again, and that's the thickest part of the cymbal too. So you have a little bit more wiggle room there. Right. Yeah. And people are like, oh, we want to see more lathing videos, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do it. And sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't do it, because I'm like, I want to get to the cymbal making, and
all the social media stuff is a little bit like it's kind of the necessary evil. A friend of mine says you got to feed the beast, and that's putting your post up on social media.
Yeah, somebody said like Tuesday and Thursday are the other days that you need to do it at, like, I don't know, 10 a.m. or something. I'm like, when I feel like doing it is when I do it.
Yeah, right.
It's I'm not about getting likes. Like, if you like it and followers and stuff like that, that's cool. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, this is cool, I'm going to talk about this, or I'm going to show this. Like the last lathing video I did, I had my wife, I said, will you just come out and take a video, because you're going to get to see me lathe just the bottom side of a hi-hat cymbal. And because people have been asking, so do you mind coming out and doing it? And she did, and it was really, really great, And I should do more of that. Like some of the cymbals that I'm making for certain drummers, they're like, hey, can you send me pictures as you're doing it? And I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll send you a video of me lathing your cymbals,
Yeah.
Because it is cool, because people don't get to see how things are made anymore.
Yeah, so true.
I've had people from other cymbal companies that, they got mad at me because I used to say that lathing was one of the most important processes, because it can ruin all the work that happened before lathing. Oh, well, hand hammering takes, much longer, and it's more important than this. And I said, there's no more important step than the other. If one doesn't get done the right way, then you get a crappy cymbal sound. But
right.
So this person said, well, it only takes you 2 minutes to lathe the cymbal. I said, yeah, but you have to know how to do it in order for it to come out the right way.
Right.
It's not the length of time it takes to make the cymbal. It's the experience. It's the decades of having done it.
Yeah.
And I had a landscaping friend come by last year. The pipe to my irrigation system valves. I drained the system in the wintertime, but something happened and the pipe burst, and I don't have the tools to fix it. And he came out and he had it done in 10 minutes. And I said, how much do I owe you? He says $100. I wrote him the check, because I don't have the tools to do it, and he does. That's why I called him.
Yeah.
You know,
10
again,
minutes. How dare you charge $100 for 10 minutes? I mean, it took him years and possibly decades and tons of money and tools to be able to do it in 10 minutes.
that's right.
That's what you're paying for.
That's what you're paying for. You're paying for my knowledge, in that you don't have to experience me doing it wrong.
Yeah.
I was afforded that by other people.
Yeah.
You know, I went through my learning curve with regard to, you know, stuff like this. This is, I don't know if this is an urban legend story or whatever, but it's a really, really good one. So engineer retires from a company, and he's on his retirement for some months, and he gets a phone call from the company that he worked for. And he said, you know, that new machine that came in right before you retired, it just stopped working and we can't get it to run. Can you come back? And he said, yeah, I don't really want to. You know, I'm retired and I'm enjoying my time, but I'll come back. So he comes back in, and he goes and he looks at the machine, and he walks around, and he's only there for 10 minutes. And he takes a piece of chalk and he marks a component and said, replace that and it will work. And then he sent in an invoice. And the invoice was for $10,000. Now, this is probably, you know, exaggerated, right?
Yeah.
And the invoice comes in, and the accountant or whatever, the finance guy goes, oh my God, he was only here for a couple minutes. Why is it $10,000? I want a detailed invoice. I want a breakdown on this $10,000. Engineer says, okay, no problem. So he sends in a new invoice. He goes, one chalk mark, $1. Knowing where to put the chalk mark, $9,999. Because all of the other engineers that worked there couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
You didn't pay me for the length of time. You paid me for my knowledge, my experience.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
And that's, you know, that's what you get with, if you get a Cymbal Craftsman cymbal, you get the 33, 34 years now of me making cymbals.
Yeah. And the stories of you with Bill Stewart and you rolling those cymbals that weren't right out to cut them up because they weren't happening. And what even just, I mean, I won't
sell a cymbal that doesn't sound right to anybody.
Yeah. And I would just imagine like the wealth of knowledge and experience that would come in, be imbued into you by just seeing these musicians and seeing the different artists, how they play and what their approach is to cymbals, what they're looking for. And then you start to see correlations, and there's a common thread between what these high level drummers want. And I know how to craft that. I know what element that is in the production process, in the design process. And you've gone through all of that. And so I know at some point I will own one of your cymbals, and it will be a treasured possession of mine. So
we should make a cymbal together.
I'm down. That'd be amazing.
I played your cymbals at the show. I really, really liked them. I thought they were really, really, really good. So
thank you. I'm trying. I'm in a place now where I'm realizing the beauty of a couple extra 100 grams of weight on a cymbal, because I make a lot of thin stuff, and it's perceptions are everything with cymbals, and people think, oh, it's got to be 20-inch and it's got to be 1,660 grams or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I'll make that for you if you insist, but trust me, let's go up to 1,800 or 1,900 grams.
The 20s I just made that went out to a few drum stores, they're in the 2,100 gram weight. And that's on purpose because they're more user friendly, not because the drummers can't play. They'll speak to a wider audience of drummers, and you're going to be able to play more styles of cymbals with them. And if you want a thin cymbal, no problem. I'll make you a thin cymbal. I'll make you whatever you want. But if you want something that you can play more genres of music with, something with a little bit more weight, as you just said, works better. Tony Williams' Nefertiti rod was just shy of 6 pounds. Okay. And he could make it sound thin, and he could make it sound heavy, and you could get the stick definition. You can make it growl when he wanted to and roar. I remember seeing Louis Bellison play with a quintet in Boston decades ago. And I'm sitting at the table with my colleagues, and he's swinging this quintet. And I swore to God, he was playing a 20-inch A Zildjian light ride. And I'm like, wow, man, I've never heard a light ride, because it was out of the catalog by that time. And he comes off during the break, and he comes over to the table, and we're, all the pleasantries. And I go, man, that cymbal's fantastic, that ride cymbal. He goes, isn't it really great? Do you want to come see it? And I said, yes. So we go back up to his drum set, and I look at it, and I go, what? And he goes, it was a 21-inch rock ride. And he started laughing. He goes, right?
Yeah.
I go, well, of course it sounds like a light ride on certain songs. You're Louis Bellson.
Right.
He goes, yeah, but I got that extra weight for when I need it. And then when I tickle it, I get it to do what I want.
Right.
And he was just kind of chuckling, because everyone in the audience is like, oh, he's got this special cymbal, and it's got the magic in it. And, Avadas, the first, consecrated it, and, all this nonsense that everybody comes up with. And he was playing just a pretty 21-inch rock ride.
Yep.
And when the music was, a little bit more subdued, he knew how to play it.
Yep. And that's it. It's the setting, and it's having the versatility.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's every cymbal it lives within the spectrum of, really, really thin and funky and complex and stuff. And then there's those downs, and then there's clean, pristine. Mm-hmm. And the farther you go this way, the more one-dimensional the sound can become at a certain point. The farther you go this way, the more unusable a sound will become at a certain point. And so you finding that middle ground is, I just thought when I first started, thin jazz cymbals. I ordered all really thin blanks, which are the hardest to shape.
They sure are, aren't they?
Fight them tooth and nail to get the shape uniform. And then before you know it, it's another umbrella, because I had to fight this thing for 4 hours to get the shape into it. And then you start to realize, like, a little bit of a lower profile gives you more spread, a little bit more weight gives you more stick attack. If you want a darker sound, maybe don't go into such an umbrella. A little bit lower sound will give you a growl and a wash and spread underneath, and the weight will give you the stick. But hey, like we talked about earlier, maybe you want to go into more of an umbrella. And so you can go thinner on the weight, because you're going to umbrella it so that you can bring that stick definition in. And so it's seeing how, like, cymbals are, they just, there's no end to the different things you could put into the design of a cymbal. And like you said, there are boundaries that are like things that you should do and shouldn't do, obviously, like there is with anything. But it's it's seemingly an unending art form. Like I can make a million cymbals and keep discovering things on cymbal number 1 million, discover something new, which is great. That's why I love it so much, and why I'll swing a hammer till I physically can't anymore. Like you said, they'll find you dead on the floor in front of the lathe. Like, that's how I feel.
It's the thing about the original Avadas making cymbals, the story goes that he got called to the palace, and the Sultan asked him, hey, make me some cymbals. And his cymbals were of such great clarity and thinness that the Zildjian dubbed him, the Sultan dubbed him Zildjian. Okay. And those cymbals were thick. Okay. Think about it, because you just said it. And when you have a thicker blank, it's actually more forgiving when you're shaping it, So what I wonder is, how much thicker were the cymbals before he made them thinner to the thick, hi-hat style cymbals that we're making today, So I'm like, how much heavier and thicker were the cymbals, and how did they make them? And, I really think Avadas the first was a blacksmith, and he was a metal worker, and he had knowledge of how to work metals in general. He could do iron and steel, brass and copper, and he of course bronze, of course, and he applied a certain knowledge to cymbal making. And I also think that there was a guild of metal workers over there that had this knowledge, and it just the Zildjian family continued it, because Avadas the third didn't want to make cymbals because they didn't make any money doing it. He was making money making candy. Everybody ate candy, you know.
Yeah.
So but anyway, we have them to thank.
Yeah, we
for
live
what,
in
what
we
we're
live
doing now.
in the shadow of their great tree that they have, grown for us, and we get to move the art form forward, hopefully, and keep it alive. This whole handcrafted thing, which I love.
So
honestly, I feel like I could talk
we
to
could.
you for like hours more. Maybe we'll do a part 2 at some point. But I just want to say
a lot of stories.
I
didn't even touch the tip of the iceberg.
I know. I bet we just barely scratched the surface. So I just want to say like a huge thank you to you for being on this podcast and
honor.
For what you are freely giving to the world of cymbal making. And you could hold all of this stuff for yourself and say, well, this is what I got, but you very clearly care about passing on what was given to you, and passing it forward. And so we're very grateful for that. And I'm super thankful that you're in this industry with us, teaching us, giving us direction and inspiration. So I really appreciate it, Paul.
I'm gonna be just like Steve Gadd. You're gonna teach me too. Maybe I can learn something from you that will help me and make something easier. I don't know if that's the right word, but a technique that works that I'm not familiar with. I only know what I know from what I was taught,
right?
And stuff that I got to develop where I worked. Doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it,
right?
And I think this giving freely comes from growing up playing the drums. I mean, drummers are very, very giving to each other. Like, hey, I like that lick that you played. Oh yeah, come over here. And I'll slow it down. Let me write it out. This is how it sounds. Because I'm not going to play the lick exactly how you played it.
Right.
The notation will be the same. It'll be in time, but my personality comes through that. The cymbals that you're making are your personality.
Mm-hmm.
The cymbals that I make, they're my personality.
Yep.
And that's what makes things great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And it's what gives us inspiration to keep moving and keep pressing in and learning and growing. And it's, we don't want to ever get to the end.
There's no finish line.
There's no finish line. And it's musicians know this. All the great musicians know there's no, I kind of think there's no true mastery of music because you can't master. There's always something new to discover. And I think that the masters, as we call them, would probably say, no, there is. I haven't reached the destination. I'm still going. Gadd being one of them. He's in his 80s, I guess.
70s, yeah.
Okay.
Mid 70s.
Mid 70s. Sorry, I didn't know.
That's okay.
No disrespect to Steve Gadd, one of my favorites. But yeah, he's still killing it.
Oh yeah,
swinging his butt off. His groove is still amazing. Still inspiring, and he's still
like pushing. How do you swing a chord note like that? How do you do that?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's been an honor. Thank you for asking me to be part of this. It's always fun for me to talk about cymbals and drums and life or whatever.
It's the best.
And I hope your viewers enjoy it. And if they have any questions about anything, any type of cymbal design that I worked on over the years or whatever, they can just email me. I answer emails all the time. I'm not a slave to email like I used to be.
Yeah.
But if you
teach me how to do that, teach me how. I need help.
I answer. I always answer, and I try to help as much as possible.
Yeah. So Paul at cymbalcraftsman.com. Reach out to Paul. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. This has been the Reverie podcast. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you, sir.